Hello, my name is Ariel Adamson with Rogue Tech, coming out of Boise, Idaho. This is the second deck tech video we have done so far. We're still working on the quality, making the kinks come out. This time I'm attempting to use a Apple microphone headphone set to increase the sound quality. We'll work on picture quality in the future. So, if you'd like to see the long version of this deck tech, where I go on random tangents about magic-related stuff, or the deck specifically, basically anything magic-related, click the link down below. Those videos tend to be a bit longer. This will be the brief overview of the deck, why I made some of the decisions, but mostly what's in the deck and why it's in the deck. So, to start off, this deck was built because I am a control player or combo player, and I had no Sphinx's Revelations to play with. The team was using all the Sphinx's Revelations, which unfortunately was an integral part. If it wasn't that, then the lands were missing. There was just issue after issue as far as coming up with something aggro, or something not aggro to play. So I decided to just throw something together since I'm not going to be playing for a couple weeks after this, and just get an idea down. Really putting my focus on Dragon Maze, so just wanted to get this down, get a good FNM in, maybe win some packs, and see how it went. So 10 minutes before the tournament, I threw together this archetype. The day before, I more or less decided that I was going to play werewolves just because it was a basic something I could throw together that I knew fairly well because I used to play it back in early Innistrad. And this is what I threw together and ended up going completely undefeated with. Well, 2-1 in 2 matches, and 2-0 in 3 matches, so 5-0 undefeated. Totally shocked everyone, but it was not easy. I had to know when to mulligan, and I had to know what I was playing against and when to sideboard correctly, the sideboard being the most intricate part of this entire construction. So let's go and start off with the main board. We'll get to the sideboard later. We're starting off with Reckless Waif. This is basically a meta call. It's actually the inspiration behind playing this deck in the first place, because I was playing 5-color control and this kept getting sided against me. Reckless Waif deals a lot of damage really fast in this format. If they're playing enemy aggro, werewolves are generally going to be bigger than their enemy aggro. If they're not playing enemy aggro, this is generally going to deal more damage than they can handle early on. So Reckless Waif is just all around powerful in the current meta. Now, a slowly rising all-star, especially in Naya Blitz, has been Mayor of Avabruck. We've always known that he has game-ending potential by himself, but more importantly, he's the missing anthem for that kind of human archetype. We no longer have Honor up here, instead we have Mayor, which has been performing very well. Next, we have Crew and Outlaw. This is basically the Pyre Heart of the deck, as well as the Gloom Surgeon of the deck. When I say Pyre Heart, I mean when it flips over, your werewolves have to be blocked by 2 creatures. Considering this is tribal werewolves, it's pretty safe to say my creatures have to be blocked by 2 creatures. And then I say Gloom Surgeon because it is a 2/2 first strike that serves as a wonderful blocker until my wolves flip over, considering the majority of the format right now has 2 toughness and cannot afford to interact with this card. Or 3 toughness when I've got a Mare in play. Now, Instigator Gang was absolutely wonderful for closing the matches. The +1 power as well as his 3 toughness were extremely relevant, dealing the extra damage. I only put 2 of because he does cost 4, and he's not as good as some of the other cards, but when he does drop, he is amazing. Now the hard part about playing werewolves is deciding to play or not to play the best werewolf of them all, Huntmaster of the Fells. Now Huntmaster / Ravager of the Fells is just amazing. There's no doubt about that he's the best werewolf there is. But the question is always, do you run Huntmaster or do you run Emerald? Personally, I prefer Huntmaster because I have no other life gain. I have the cardstock to play the shock lands, so I'm going to be taking a lot of damage, and this is my only way to gain more life, as well as generally my only way to get back into the game should something go wrong. His 4 mana was never really the big issue, which is usually the argument against him. He served great to turn the game around and really end it. Now, let's go to the werewolf-specific suite. We have 2 Full Moon's Rise. This is +0, +1/+0 trample. Great turn 2 drop on a flipped Reckless Wave. Keeping that regeneration shield open for every werewolf I drop after that makes it very, very awkward for my opponent, especially when they try to force it by killing off a mare or something, and I just don't care because I'm going to drop better stuff later on. Puts him in a really awkward situation. And then of course, Moon Mist, the ultimate combat trick right now. Unfortunately, it only works for werewolves, but still it is extremely powerful. The only issue I've found with it is people do actually play Huntmaster in other decks, so I have to be kind of careful about how I go about it. But if my dudes are going to be big enough to survive Huntmaster's flip, then it's still a very viable combat trick as long as they've either cast 2 spells that turn or just dealing more damage than they can deal with. Even in the mirror match, which unfortunately is a thing, even in the mirror match it is still relevant because you're, as a werewolf player, you don't generally want to sack a whole lot of dudes in unfavorable trades. So you'll block just what you need to survive, and a surprise Moon Mist will generally turn whatever you let through into enough to kill. Now, the unusual part about this deck is I was very, very aware of the fact that werewolves as an archetype were not going to be viable. They weren't going to be competitive with the rest of the format, and my specific goal when going into the night was just to earn some extra credit in preparation for Dragon Maze, which is really my focus at the moment. So I decided to splash white. Avacyn's Pilgrim has coupled very well with Mare of Avabruck in the Naya Blitz decks, as well as it serves as another 1-drop to speed up the deck. And to close out a nice round 10 1-drops is Champion of Parish is a 2-of. Considering every werewolf is a human first, very, very good synergy with the deck. Then some white specific cards. We've got Frontline Medic and his ability to stop the Sphinx's Revelations, Bonfires, and random Magma Quake, which actually I got hit with, as well as his Indestructibility. Just real utility. He honestly didn't see a whole lot of play, but having him in there and having that option is definitely important, and I wouldn't change that. The one that I might change, though, is Mentor the Meek. Still not totally sold on whether I like him in the deck or not, just because he is fairly irrelevant if you don't need him. He's either completely relevant or completely irrelevant, and running the risk of completely irrelevant is often not as good as having that option. So when I did play him, I didn't regret it. That's not to say I played him every time I saw him, though. Now, the reason that I played Naya Werewolves, the reason I had to splash white, because I knew I was splashing some other color, but the reason I didn't decide to splash blue for Snapcaster Mage, or black for Disciple of Bolas, or any of the other options that I was looking at, is because this card is simply too amazing to play without. Boros Charm is the missing ingredient. I in fact had one of the more experienced Jund players at the end of the night, after I beat him, tell me, don't tell the werewolf kid that he needs to run Boros Charm, because we have a kid at the shop that does play werewolves and doesn't generally do all too well. He snakes game 1 fairly easily and then loses game 2 and 3, just because a post-sideboard werewolf matchup is never good for werewolves. But Boros Charm handles all of those situations. Gets in the damage you need to deal at the end, makes your dudes indestructible through the Wrath, or when they attempt to do crazy blocks, or simply double strike into the kill. Now, for the lands, we have 22 lands. That would be 1, 2, 3, 4 Cavern of Souls. Pretty easy pick, considering it is all humans, and I don't want to be missing my colors. I also want to make sure that I'm dropping turn 1. Fortunately, all of my turn 1s are humans, so Cavern's just an easy pick. I'm not super concerned about counter spells, but sometimes relevant. There's Stomping Grounds, that would be the old art, signed one. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of either of the arts of Stomping Grounds, hoping they do like some sort of promo or something, maybe an alt art for the Modern Masters. I don't know. Something would be cool. These are the only slow land in the deck. Again, slow lands refer to core set and Innistrad lands because they will never come into play untapped at the start of the game. But red-green is far too important to just rely on 4 sources, 8 if you count the caverns. And we're running 4 Sacreds. As you're probably figuring out by now, I took a lot of damage from my own lands. It was not unusual for me to end up, these are 4 temples by the way, it is not unusual for me to end at 14 or even 12 damage, never taking damage from my opponent, just because I was taking shocks every single turn. But when you're dealing so much damage at such a high capacity, it's well worth it. You'd rather end the game at 12 than be sitting at 18 watching your opponent drop the Supreme Verdict. Then the last 2 lands of the deck, a singleton Forest, and a singleton Kessler Wolfrun. The Kessler Wolfrun is more so just for an option. It was actually relevant once. It brought my opponent from what they thought was going to be 5 life down to 4 life, which incidentally is exactly what I needed to kill him with the Boris Charm that was in my hand. Now, like I said, the sideboard is probably the most important part of this entire deck. Starting off simple was 2 Rest in Peace, because I knew that the Reanimator matchup would be absolutely devastating if they dropped a any kind of big dude, specifically Grizzlebrand, but Thragtusk, all of those life gainers early on would just be rough. Boris Charm, also pretty easy one, just go up to the full play set against enemy Wrath, so on and so forth. Now the other 12 cards were an idea that ran across me that I just wasn't sure if it was going to work at first, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized it was exactly what I needed. I'm just going to go ahead and fan all of these out. We've got 2 Thalia, 2 Champion of the Parish, 4 Burning Tree Emissary, and 4 Lightning Mauler, aka most of the spell suite for my Blitz, which is a already well-established deck that most of Werewolves' bad matchups, especially post-board, can't really handle too well. For example, control decks can't really drop their Wrath in time, or if they do, the Boris Charm gets through it. Thalia slows them down, even some enemy aggros are just faster than them. It was just the perfect piece that was missing. Every bad matchup that I otherwise would have had, I was able to side into Naya Blitz and just get in faster. Now, the trick to this deck is knowing when to mulligan, knowing when to sideboard, what to sideboard, how much to sideboard, whether you need to do a hybrid, a full transformation, and which cards do you take out. It's pretty easy to say if you're doing any kind of transformation, you're going to take out the werewolf-specific cards. However, which werewolves you take out as well beyond that is the difficult part. Sometimes you take out frontline medics, keep in a little bit of the werewolf synergy. Sometimes you take out the instigators and the hunt masters and you just lower your curve and go for it. So this deck definitely takes some playing around with. I hope you enjoy it. This is Wolf Blitz. I've been Arnold Adamson, and you're welcome to follow me on imtgapp.com/forum or the IMTG app via iPhone under the name Kaleo42. Thank you for watching, and remember that the full video with added information is down below. You can expect more videos from us in the future, specifically from other players, as I'm going to kick him in the rear to make him start doing videos.